It is 3 months, my friends, since I have talked to the people of this country about our national problems. But during this period, many things have happened. And I am glad to say that the major part of them have greatly helped the well-being of the average citizen. In the short space of these few months, I am convinced that at least 4 million have been given employment. Or saying it another way, 40% of those seeking work have found it. That does not mean, my friends, that I am satisfied or that you are satisfied that our work is ended. We have a long way to go, but we are on the way.
That was Franklin D. Roosevelt explaining to the American people what he was intended to do and what he was doing about the Great Depression. Now, as the economic news turns to be pretty bad and pretty depressing, and American commentators talk about perhaps not a Great Depression, but a Great Recession, it's important to look at how our economy stands and how foreign economies, including the American economy, is affecting our own. So tonight, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be meeting someone who studied this problem and is going to tell us what we have in store for the rest of 2008. I'm Manolo Quezon, the Explainer. This is the Explainer, where I explain why issues are issues. Now, returning as our explainee tonight is Jackie Pascual. Hi, Jackie. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Manolo.
And we're also joined in our studio audience by communications students from the Lyceum of the Philippines, who will be arriving in a bit, and ICTM students from De La Salle University. Welcome to the show. Well, you know, Jackie, tonight we're going to be taking a look at how our economy is doing and what things have in store for us. But as we prepare to do that, let's invite our audience to join in the discussion and weigh in with their questions.
Yes, Manolo. To all our viewers, join our discussion. Text REACT space X space your name, your question or reaction, and send to 2366 for Globe and Sun and 231 for Smart. Or you can also log on to our website at www.the-explainer.com.
More on the ride ahead for our economy when we return. As we do on occasion, tonight's episode will feature not a lecture by me, but a presentation by our guest. Now, our guest is Cielito Habito, who, of course, was NEDA chief during the boom time of the Ramos years. And he's also a member of FGO, the Organization of Former Government Officials. Now, welcome to the show, Dr. Habito. And let me explain to our viewers the origin of this presentation. Some time ago, the Philippine Daily Inquirer held, as it tends to have, a special presentation by Dr. Habito for interested members of the public, as well as those of us from the Inquirer, about the true state of the economy in reaction to the President's State of the Nation address, which of course presented the government's views on how the economy is doing and what we can look forward to. So without further ado, Dr. Habito, you titled your presentation Storm Winds, Low Fuel, and Excess Baggage.
Well, I guess that's the metaphor for what we're seeing right now as the challenges to our economy. If we liken our economy to an airplane, an aircraft negotiating difficult times, it's really three things. I mean, storm winds stand for the things beyond our control, external to us, but low fuel and excess baggage are things more internal to us. And so I think what we can say is that the difficulties our economy is facing right now really can be likened to these three things: storm winds, low fuel, and excess baggage.
Okay, so as we start along, your first slide.
Well, let's start with the good news. And I think the main good news we can draw out of the most recent economic performance is really that the private domestic investment growth, in fact, has rebounded. And this comes after a 6-year investment drought, as I like to call it, because actually our investments had hardly grown if at all, since 2002.
Now, last year you were here and you gave your presentation on the economy on this show, and of course previously you had done so on the Inquirer, and you had pointed out that Filipinos had not been investing in the economy at that point last year. So
Precisely.
this is why it's good news.
That's
for
why
you.
this is genuinely good news. Because the other thing that makes it good news is that there was actually a drop in government investment, in effect, which is really government expenditures on construction, as well as, and rather a steep drop, in foreign direct investments, which is, in fact, according to the last report by the Bangko Sentral, it went down by 68%, and that's a mighty steep drop. Notwithstanding that, the first quarter figures were pretty good for overall investments. In other words, the domestic private investors essentially more than made up for the drop in government and foreign investments. So that is genuinely good news.
And your second bit of good news?
Well, we have been talking about the government wanting to balance the budget. In the last 3 months, at least, there have been modest surpluses that have been posted by the government. We still are in deficit, but it's 18 billion, which is a lot less than what we were seeing same time last year. So that is relatively good news as well.
Okay, so going on to your next slide.
Now, unfortunately, we have bad news,
Okay.
and much of that is undone by the fact that in the three things I like to say are the most important measures of the economy, namely prices, jobs, and incomes, the news is bad. I mean, prices, we all know that prices have been rising faster than they have in the last 17 years, with inflation rate now at 12.2% as of last report, and that's the fastest we've seen since 1991. In terms of jobs, the official statistics also tell us that we lost a net of 168,000 jobs over the past year.
Now, net means that actually we lost more, but then there were also jobs coming in.
That's
so
right.
If you add the two, this is the difference.
The net, that's the difference, in fact, because in actuality, we actually lost 244,000 jobs in the industry sector, a lot of it manufacturing jobs, but somewhat made up for by about 40,000 additional jobs in agriculture, some 30,000 jobs in services. So the net, it comes out, is 168. The problem with that, by the way, Manolo, is that every year we know that about 1 million new working-age Filipinos come into the labor force. And instead of adding 1 million jobs, as what we need to do to keep these people employed, we actually lost a couple of 100,000 jobs. Now, the other bad news coming from the, of course, in the basic three is incomes, or GDP, which measures both income and output. And again, while we had the much heralded 7.2% growth last year, it has dramatically slowed down to 5.2% this year. And this is really a slowdown or a reversal, meaning even a drop in production in most sectors of the economy, except for three that I will talk about in a while. But again, we can see that in personal consumption spending, which is the biggest part of the spending for our economy, there's been a dramatic slowdown. Foreign direct investments, I've mentioned already how it's gone down steeply. Government spending is now, in fact, a drag on our economy rather than the boost it was last year when it was the main source of the 7.3%.
And a little later, you're going to be explaining why it's a drag instead of being a
That's
boost.
right. And then exports and imports, in fact, I say here stunning reversals because we're seeing negative growth. In other words, again, both exports and imports have fallen
Both
so far.
at the same time.
That's right. So this is the some of the bad news. Unfortunately, it, as I said, seems to more than outweigh the good news we're seeing so far, especially the fact that these three are the things that matter most to the ordinary Filipino.
So let's zero in. With your next slide, you're
Well,
looking at... Yeah.
That's right. This breaks down the growth of our economy. And again, if you look at the second to the last column, we see what the performance was for the full year of 2007. And that's where you see the 7.2 growth in gross domestic product, and 8% growth in gross national product, which now includes the income of Filipinos abroad. But there's been a slowdown, in fact, as of the first quarter of 2008. And so we've seen that, well, services continues to be the fastest growing sector, but that has slowed down to 6.9 from 8.1 as well. And of course, we see there how the 7.2 has turned into a 5.2.
So across the board, things are in a sense slowing down.
That's right. So the economy is still growing, but it's much slower than the way it was growing last year. So that is really the result, obviously, of a lot of things, including the storm winds that I referred to, the global forces that are putting pressure on our economy.
So let's move on to your next slide, which, okay, these are the winners.
These
basically.
are the unusual performers in the economy so far this year. And I say unusual because they actually improved on their performance in the past year. And surprisingly, water transport actually sped up from 5% growth last year to 25.9% growth, notwithstanding sinking ferries